Hey, what's up, everybody? This is King Von Jr., the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm representing the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on X, um, formerly known as Twitter/X. That's 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's X page at Victory Pod 1. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. to follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer excuse me, for the Unpopular Review Wrestling Show, Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by friend of the program, Mike Knox, on Mondays at 6 p.m. So, with that being said, there's definitely a lot of ground to cover. Of course, as you all know, of course, this is the day before Juneteenth, so I hope everyone has a very happy Juneteenth. Like I said, have a great time, celebrate. Like this is great to see this is getting the attention that it deserves. And so like I said, of course, may you all enjoy your Juneteenth, and also because of that, I want to talk about this BRP 50. At least at least the first part of at least the majority of what we have so far on the list, and of course the rankings, are still going and counting. But I just definitely want to share some of my thoughts on the BRP 50. I'm going to be sharing the list, as well on on my own page as well. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, I'm going to go into it. Of course, congratulations to those who are first time entries on this list. And so, by the time, of course, by the Black Wrestling BRP 50. So, of course, tomorrow is when they're going to get the official reveal in terms of who's going to be number one. But after that, I'm going to give my recap, of the top 10. But in terms of what I've seen thus far, I'm going to go over that, as well as as well as Liv Morgan's injury and the impact that has. We can talk about Asuka's return, as well as the qualifying matches for the King and Queen of the Ring, and a lot of NXT. So there's certainly NXT favorites that are on this BRP 50 list as well. And so just great to see. Of course, I'm going to talk about Ron Killings / R-Truth and how the truth has set him free. And we're all the better off for it. And also, I want to say that I'm working on an article. It's going to talk about TKO and the relationship with WWE and just the ramifications of it. So please make sure to stay tuned for that. So now, without further ado, and also NBA Finals news, the Thunder are up 3-2 over the Pacers. So this is tomorrow's going to be Game 6, and so so as far as that, and then then Game 7 is going to be on the 22nd, Sunday, if it's necessary, because look like OKC's really starting to take charge, and Halliburton only had like 4 points in the last game, so looks like it's about to get pushed further away. And another thing I want to talk about as well is this is a combination of both, like I said, sports, whether it's basketball and wrestling. So like I said, it's a blend, it's a mix. So first off, I want to talk about, of course, in terms of rings, ring culture, if you will, the narrative that goes around it. So before I even go into, the wrestling conversation, which is the other half of the show, I want to take time to really dive into this talk about it. And the reason why I say that is because recently, LeBron James, was on a podcast with somebody who's having some type of interviews, like talking with Steve Nash, whatever. And so he was talking about how how they make such a big deal, how rings are such a big deal, whatever. And so the thing is, the message, I get where he's coming from. The message is fine, but just the issue backlash is coming from is because of who it comes from, because the messenger. And considering, like I said, and the reason why I say that is considering, LeBron's track record in terms of, the way he got those rings, and and how before that he was a punchline. He became a meme. You know what I mean? And so, and of course, that was those are some driving factors as to why he made the decision, quote unquote, pun intended, literally, that he made, because he didn't want to keep facing the ridicule. And so he's often credited as the catalyst for what we see when it comes to the modern era, social media era of super teams, right? And so and so like I said, for him, like I said, to feel the way he feels about rings, when he was the one that said not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 hours, up to like 8, I mean, predicted. Obviously didn't happen, got back to back, which is fine. And so, like I said, for him to, like I said, to criticize, just to make the criticism that he has about rings. And I mean, I get it that he wants to, wants to give credit to players that never won. But at the same time, I like Charles Barkley's, I like his response to that. And he knows that when it comes to greatness, there's levels to it. And I like Barkley's response when he says that, even though, they're all, Hall of Famers, everybody's in the Hall of Fame, but even with that, they're on different floors, so guys like him, Patrick Ewing, Allen Iverson's, guys like the Dominique Wilkins, that dude number 32 in Utah, so but yeah, like I said, guys like that are Hall of Famers and legendary players. But the thing is, because they lack the hardware, because they don't have the same accolades, they're not going to be on the same floor. Fair or unfair, they're not going to be on the same floor at the same table as the likes of Jordan, Magic, Kobe, Kareem, Bird, whoever it is you name, right? So does that diminish their greatness? Does that diminish what they brought to the table? Absolutely not. It doesn't diminish. It doesn't make them any less. But at the same time, there's a certain criteria when it comes to greatness. So it's just like, it's just like they, as great as they were, there were certain boxes that they did not check off. When you measure them to, when you measure them to sort of the pantheon, top 10ish, level players or whatever, right? You know what I mean? So it's just like, the thing is, it's not just about the championships, but also what role you played, how important you were as a contributor to that championship team. So if you are, I don't even know why. It's not even, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just like, if you are a dominant player and you were the leader of your championship team, of course you're going to be ranked much higher. You know what I mean? And so, oftentimes, of course, the team sport, but fair, unfair, whether you lead a championship team or not, that's to make or break. So and at the same time, oftentimes, like see, like with how you lead that team or how that team is around you can make or break, your legacy, your perception, who you rank, everything like that. You know what I mean? So that's why, you don't see dudes that don't have a championship in the top 10. The common denominator, for example, anybody's typical top 10 all the time is that they've been champions. That's the like I said, higher in when it comes to greatness. You have those that are, like say, just elevated and held in high regard than others. And I believe that comes with sort of like the pecking order, whatever, if you will. Because at some point there has to be sort of like a barometer or pecking order when it comes to greatness. At a certain point, there has to be like a sort of like a separation of like I see like a more divided, more excuse me, at a certain point, you know, um, there has to be some type of like qualifiers. There has to be, some type of the way to separate things in terms of, I guess, to really, like say, when it comes to, um, just qualifying greatness. You know what I mean? That's why, like, for example, when it comes to wrestling, you know, that's the reason why you can't really put, as great as they are, someone like Jake the Snake or Ted DiBiase, Davey Boy Smith, whatever. You can't really put them in the same category as Stone Cold, um, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, guys like that. Roman, whoever, right? Cena, typical names. That's the reason why you can't really put them on in the same category like that. They're great in their own way, but the thing is, you have to have a certain sort of like, um, certain way to sort these things out. And so, um, so like when it comes to wrestling, like I said, when it comes to body work, like so, not only of course like what you've done in the ring, quality of matches, drawing power, your importance to your promotion. You know what I mean? Those things. Like I said, when it comes to obviously ratings and things like that. Other factors, but something is a common. I mean, here it is. There's got to be like at least some type of common denominator. So, so the thing about it is that other than all those other things, the thing about it is that, like I said, when it comes to championships, especially world championships, title reigns, how much of a difference maker you were, and like just your cultural impact, on the industry as well as your promotion and everything like that. Those are the things that that elevate you higher than others. When it comes to, let's say, the NBA, for example, right? I'm going to get, like I said, going to get into wrestling in a minute, but I just have to say this. When it comes to the NBA, like, so, like, of course, not only rings, statistics, like your production, of course, um, you know, uh, your impact on the game, like how much of a breakout star you were in your particular era, like how much you stood out, you know, you know, you know, when it came to that era, right? And so, like, so, just really just your level of dominance, pretty much, right? So, so I gauge things pretty much the same way. So I make sure I do my best to keep the same energy when it comes to from the way I rank basketball, from the way that I rank football, from the way that I rank wrestling. You know what I mean? So I make sure to keep the same energy as much as I can, just all across the board, right? And so I say all that to say that, you know, um, it's great to make sure that certain players are acknowledged. And here, even when it comes to being underrated, overrated, this comes to a certain point where people overuse the word overrated or underrated. There are some people that are ranked where they need to be. You know what I mean? And so, um, like I said, like I said, it's certain people that that are ranked, like at their best ranking, like where they generally need to be anyway. And there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. It's just that certain people hit higher benchmarks, checked off more boxes, had greater accolades, stood out more as players, left a bigger stamp on the game. So, like I say, when it comes to just the thing is, it's all about looking at the bigger picture. It's all about looking at the overall body of work. And even when I do my top 50 wrestlers list, and when BRP does when Black Wrestling does their list, they look at the entire collective body of work. And the more boxes that you check off, the higher that you rank. Plain and simple. That's ultimately, I believe, what ultimately matters the most, what ultimately boils down to. And what I mean. So as far as that, like I said, that's just something that that really, I felt as though I really had to get off my chest. So now it is time to talk about, now it's time to give my recap on the week in wrestling. And I'm going to start off, first things first, with Friday Night SmackDown. And this was quite an eventful, quite an eventful episode of SmackDown, and in more ways than one. And let's just say, the truth is definitely setting some people free right now. And so of course, I'm going to go into more of that in a minute. So we see that John Cena's farewell tour continues in Phoenix, Arizona. Hence, that is why he's wearing the purple and orange like the Phoenix Suns. And for anybody that notices the pattern when it comes to Cena, is that wherever he goes, the pattern with Cena is that every city he goes to, he wears the he wears the home team colors. Whoever's whoever sports town, whatever color is associated with with that particular team, whatever that team, whatever that city's most popular sport is, he's going to wear those colors that represent that. So if he's in Phoenix, obviously going to be wearing Phoenix Suns colors. So let's say when Cena was in Los Angeles, which would have worn Laker colors. That's just me. But for Money in the Bank in LA, he was wearing he was wearing the Rams colors. And so like I said, I like how he's doing that. And even when it comes to different countries, that he goes to, for instance, when he went to Scotland, he had a shirt that had the Scottish flag. You know what I mean? So like all things like that. So I like that approach that he brings to the table. I think that's a really cool twist. You know what I mean? So as far as even with him being a heel, you know what I mean? I still like that part about it. But yeah, of course, John Cena, the unseen 17, right? And I'm definitely going to make sure to digitize that, that John Cena Injustice picture that I drew of him. I thought that was pretty cool because he's in his Injustice Superman era right now, in terms of heel turn. So I did that, but of course, back to the main thing. You see the 17-time champion claiming Mount Rushmore Pro Wrestling is just his face 4 times because nobody compares to him in the past, present, or future. So talk your talk, Cena. I ain't mad at that. Of course, John Cena talked about how he's been a step ahead of everyone the whole time. And he said that he put Punk in the corner by making him fight in Saudi Arabia. And so, of course, that's when Cody Rhodes came to his ring and said Cena was right about everything he said. We also reminded Cena that he pinned him at Money in the Bank. And of course, Randy Orton came to the ring and said he's determined to get another title shot by winning the King of the Ring tournament. The LA Knight also came out. LA Knight, we have this. And the biggest fan is right now. Also came out to voice opinion, which of course, John Cena ended up leaving without saying another word. As Cena was walking up the aisle, of course, Cena gets hit with, a surprise. And was that's when like, matter of fact, I take that back. This I thought about, I guess because of, because while I was the review I was looking at, and matter of fact, the Phoenix thing that was before when we put Punk in the corner, about going to Saudi for Night of Champions, but in this particular instance, actually, John Cena, was actually reminded me of Dr. Thugonomics pretty much with the white shirt. But anyway, as Cena walks up to the ramp, you see Ron Killings, aka R-Truth, formerly known, formerly known as R-Truth, formerly known as Cena's number one fan, and so this dude put the hands and feet to Cena. So we can very much say that the truth has set him free. So salute to my man Ron Killings. And so like I said, I definitely like that. I thought that was a great segment, a great way to kick off the show. And so I thought that was hilarious. So he attacked him and gave him a beatdown. But anyway, like I said, and the thing about it is that Cena is definitely doing a good job of making himself sound like a tactician. Based on everything he's done in recent months, and justifying everything that he's done. Sounds like a true villain. He's a master tactician, right? Whether it's Thanos, Dr. Doom, guys like that, Magneto, ultimate tacticians. So John Cena's promos, the way that he delivers his speeches, comes off that way, And matter of fact, I remember there was a promo they did with Daniel Bryan back in 2013, and Cena had this super stone straight face, right? And he was talking about, I've faced bigger opponents than you, and I've beaten them all, and that's a very, and he said, and that's a very strong list, Daniel Bryan. Said it's all many, they list off names like Triple H, Shawn Michaels, CM Punk, Randy Orton, Batista, The Rock, and then that's when Dan Bryan stopped me. He was like, wait a minute. He was like, you talk about these guys that like they're much better than me, and there's a fan that just yelled out, they are, and of course that clip's all over the internet right now. But the thing is, like, with the way I just use that as an example of Cena executing his more serious side. And at that time he was still a face, but now he's transitioning that over to to being a heel. And even though it's not necessarily history making, but at the same time it's just him checking off a box. Something that Vince would have never, ever, ever greenlit at all. So so I guess that's sort of a plus, if you will, whatever. Others have the criticisms about it. But yeah, just him, just checking off the box before he retires, because he's definitely on his farewell tour. And the thing about it is that Cena literally has a new shirt for every single city. Like I said, every single city that he visits. But of course, of course, as far as that, then moving on, we start things off with the fatal four-way between LA Knight, Randy Orton, Carmelo Hayes, and Aleister Black. And the winner of this match, by way of RKO to Melo, is Randall Keith Orton. And so, towards and the thing is, the good thing is everyone had moments to shine, but it felt like Carmelo Hayes was able to stand out more than his opponents. And the thing about it is that because he has so much of a chip on his shoulder and he has much more to prove compared to everyone else. And I want to go and say this podcast is definitely a podcast that defends Carmelo Hayes. So it's the Pro Mello, a podcast, social media account. There's no slander at all of Carmelo on his platform whatsoever. So there's definitely somebody that that I support, that I defend, and see so much greatness and upside in him. Regardless of his circumstance, the way, with the positions that he's put in. But at the same time, at the same time before he got to the main roster, Melo, was highly decorated, and so the thing is, because of how highly decorated and how critically acclaimed he was at NXT, many of us, myself included, if given the green light, this dude is able to keep that same energy on the main roster, and so, and what I mean by that is that, he has the capabilities, obviously, and the ability and the skills, the total package, to be able to, carry that same energy over to the main roster and, be decorated, on that platform as well. So if there was, since we're talking about, Juneteenth, Black wrestling and stuff, I've said it before. If you're looking for, if you're looking for that Black Shawn Michaels prototype, look no further than Carmelo Hayes, and that's a big reason why Shawn was so highly invested in him and saw so much in him, and put him in the best positions possible to succeed. Because I'm pretty sure that Shawn sees the element of himself in Melo, and even on NXT, there were shades of that, especially when he turned heel. That reminded me so much of 1993 Shawn Michaels. It's almost scary, and the dynamic between him and Trick reminded me of Shawn and Diesel. So the thing is, with the way that he carried NXT on his shoulders, and I know that he's one of those guys that will go above and beyond and not let size be a hindrance for him. And so, for the people who want to make memes to disrespect him and just to just be heinous and horrendous, shame on you. Shame on you. And so, and the thing is, I'm not one to advocate assault or anything like that, but there comes a point where some of these people on the internet, deserve a curb stomp, if not, good old chin check. A right jab followed by a left hook. A little something. And whoever sharing those memes or whatever, it's just like, you better hope that you don't run into Melo in public. Because if so, he definitely would punch him in the throat. And there are a lot of these people online, who say things that that definitely warrant to get punched in the throat in public. Let's call it what it is. The way that they play in these wrestlers' face online, and say these things, and telling you they will not have the audacity to keep that same energy in their face. They will not have the same energy. They will not keep the same energy to play in their face in real life. And like I said, of course, Russell votes, whoever you are, shame on you. Whoever's going to run that account, shame on you. Shame on you, because you know better. You know better. You're making excuses, talking about, oh, I didn't think about it. Come on now. You know good and well that you thought enough, looked at it and thought enough of it to be a good idea in your mind, up here, to think, to think it was a good idea to press that, to repost that, and the thing is, even when you deleted it, the screenshot is still there. It's still floating around, even with the screenshot. Even after you deleted the screenshot, the internet never forgets, right? And so, for people to post that, and especially when you know how damaging stuff like that is, how words like that are weaponized. You know what I mean? And the thing is, these wrestlers pay attention to that stuff. And that's why, don't be surprised, when they clap back at you, when they block you or whatever, or if they happen to see you in public. That right there, people never, like I said, the thing is, even in public, people never forget what you say about them online. And the thing is, either they can, um, either they can block you online or block you in public by, um, telling people not to deal with you, not to be bothered with you. You know what I mean? And so, if you find yourself in a position where you don't have don't have as many opportunities, where you're not, where you don't have access, to these press conferences and media opportunities and things like that, it's, like I said, and especially after you, said very disparaging and insulting things, like I said, don't be surprised, when those opportunities dry up, because because there's trolling and these memes and stuff like that. Those are weapons. And a lot of these people, in the moment, they clearly don't care, but in the long term, they're burning bridges. And so, what I mean? Like, the thing is, you have to realize that the people that you're talking about behind that keyboard are real human beings. As I said before about the Nia Jax, about Nia Jax, right? These same people who hide behind keyboards and and use the excuse of it's just wrestling to be heinous and insulting and cruel and everything like that. Like I said, the things that you say about, for example, Nia behind a keyboard, you will not have the same energy, or the same you would not even have the same heart. Like, so, you wouldn't even have the same energy or keep that audacity to say those things to her in her face. Because if so, you'll find yourself somewhere in the hospital or somewhere, picking your teeth up off the floor. So that's why I say tread lightly and be respectful. Be very, very respectful. That's why, that's why, a lot of these Facebook groups and stuff, even I have to, put disclaimers as well. It's just like, whatever your opinion is, be respectful. And like I said, if anything, look, don't let the internet get you beat up. That's all I gotta say to Russell Votes, or whoever that jabroni is, and anyone else who who has that, thinks like that, who carries himself like that. Don't let the internet get you jumped. That's my little PSA. That's a word of wisdom ahead of time. But yeah, that was just because I said something about Carmelo Hayes. How about this? That's funny how that was. I ain't gonna keep taking up so much time with it. I just had to get that off my chest. It was very, very much needed to say. But like I said, when it comes to Melo, the sky is the limit and beyond. I mean, he's someone who I would highly invest in. When it comes to the future of the company. And so, just and the thing is, the sooner they realize that, the better. And next up, we have a fatal four-way with Jade Cargill versus Piper Niven versus Nia Jax versus Mi Chen. But before that, Jacob Fatu came out and came out to talk about why he turned on Solo and Money in the Bank, and then Solo's call eventually appeared on screen. They said that Jacob Fatu, they made a mistake in Money in the Bank. We can forgive him if he says, "I love you, Solo," next week. You definitely ain't getting that, especially with the way that you insulted Jacob, in that room. And little did you know that Jacob heard everything that you said. So you definitely not getting no more "I love you" Solos. You know what I mean? And of course, of course, Solo was, when he used a line, "I brought you into this world, I could take you out," type of thing, like whatever, dude. Like really, the bloodline thing is certainly over. You can tell the ship has officially sailed with that. So that chapter is over now. We're going to nothing. But anyway, after that, after the promo vignette, after that promo, next up we have the Queen of the Ring quarterfinal matches with of course with Jade Cargill take on Piper Niven, Nia Jackson, Michin, and we saw that that Nia and Piper temporarily took each other out, so it was left down with Jade Cargill and Michin to square off in the ring. And so the announcers also mentioned that Nia eliminated Jade from the tournament last year, goes by DQ, so it wasn't seen as a decisive victory. And side note, Nia versus Jade is definitely one of the rivalries I'm putting in universe mode. Anyway, it makes sense. So of course, Nia Jackson and Piper Niven briefly formed an alliance to beat up Jade and Michin, and typically, of course, beat up to take on Jade and Michin to get everybody out with the moonsault. And so, and of course, other than a few standout spots, especially when it came to Nia and Piper, eventually I think that they're definitely going to have some type of feud. They're definitely have to have some type of face off. I mean, even though Nia Jackson, Piper Niven have gone face to face, in the Royal Rumble last year. Of course, with Nia eliminating Niven. You can tell that Piper Niven wasn't backing down from Nia either. So of course, the match itself wasn't really groundbreaking until Jade Cargill was tossed with the announce table in the way Barrett. But in the end, Jade Cargill ends up getting the win by hitting Piper Niven with Jade. And so as far as that, we also saw after that we also saw Zelina Vega have a backstage moment with Nick Aldis. She was asking for Master Julia, and so of course I would say that also Nia and Piper could definitely be a pretty solid tag team. In terms of the two female powerhouses. When it comes to that, as far as that's concerned, they could definitely be terrorizers, pretty much, just because of their size and their dominance. So I could definitely see them, if done right, they could be a tag team and be tag champions naturally. And we have Motor City Machine Guns versus the YS6. The winners of this match, the YS6. And so yeah, so as far as that, also we have Charlotte Flair versus Alba Fire versus Alexa Bliss versus Candice LeRae. And so this is another Queen of the Ring quarterfinal match. And so the winner of this match, Alexa Bliss. And one of the highlights, was when Charlotte Flair had Alba Fire locked in the figure 8. And just in the camera angle of Alexa Bliss looking at Charlotte, that was priceless. And then eventually, Alexa Bliss her finish on Candice LeRae and got the pin before Alba Fire could even tap out. Surprisingly, Charlotte walked away without making too much of a big deal about it. And then, of course, Brock Hillings with Truth asked Nick Aldis for a match against him next week, and Nick Aldis agreed. And I like the way that John Cena got in Nick Aldis' face and Cena turned his hat backwards, and people were saying it looked like he aged, that he aged backwards by 15 years. I was like, yeah, pretty much. It gave off WrestleMania 19 John Cena vibes, if you will. Then, last but not least, we have another King of the Ring quarterfinal match for the 4-way. Featured Cody Rhodes, Andrade, Damian Priest, and Shinsuke Nakamura. And obviously, as we all know, Cody Rhodes ends up winning and advancing. So that's it. When it comes to when it comes to the SmackDown recap. So now this is where things start to heat up when it comes to Monday Night Raw. You know what I mean? So we saw the return of Bayley. We saw the return of Asuka. I would say this was more noteworthy in my estimation than what SmackDown was. And so this episode of Raw took place in Green Bay. And so we saw that, of course, Io Sky comes out. First off, we saw Liv Morgan dominate Mysterio made their way to the ring. And we saw a quick replay of Liv Morgan take out Nikki Bella last week. Congratulations to Liv. Let's give a round of applause for Liv Morgan for doing what she did. Not all heroes wear capes, even though she's a character villain, but in that case, she was definitely a hero for the way she took out Nikki. I thought that was great. You know what I mean? It serves them right for trying to roll out Nikki like she's Trish Stratus or something, some type of red carpet treatment. Like, we all know that child support alimony ain't gonna pay itself, but I digress. Anyway, of course, I saw Liv Morgan introduce herself as the greatest women's tag champion, Dom as the greatest Asuka champion, whatever. There's a part of Liv Morgan in her promos that still sounds like you sound like a 12-year-old or something. You know what I mean? Like, and just her cadence, just her delivery. I think that's just the heel thing in her. But of course, Liv Morgan talked a lot of trash about Nikki Bella, bragged about her accomplishments. It was a typical heel promo. And then she calls up Io Sky because she wants a rematch with the Women's World Championship. Well, it took a few seconds before the Teams of the Sky showed up, and definitely turned into a fight that ended with Sky sending both Liv and Dominic out the ring. And it's clear that Liv Morgan is definitely in position as the very next challenger. And of course we had Io, being typical baby face, talking about how Liv needs to show Nikki Bella respect. Like, come on now. Like, yeah, like really, of all people, and the way that the Bella's being positioned as some super vintage act or something, as if as if they're like an act from like the 80s and 90s or early 2000s. Like, come on now. I mean, I think there needs to be at least more than enough time to pass over before start really seeing them in that aspect. But like I said, I'm never really the biggest enthusiast of the Bella twins. I try to tell that to a friend of the program, Mike, but you don't see it that way. But whatever, it's another time for another day. And of course, we saw that Corey Graves from Pat McAfee on commentary, and so of course, having Liv Morgan's character believe that Io Sky was just handed the title for a single second definitely made her look stupid. So of course, Io gave Liv the title and just kicked her teeth in, just about. Then we have, of course, we have the return of the Empress herself, Asuka. And not only that, but her original theme song was brought back as well, the Empress of Tomorrow, right? And so I was like, great. It was definitely highlighted by the return of Asuka. We also saw, because Asuka takes on Ivy Nile, Stephanie Rock here, and Raquel Rodriguez. And so because the Queen of the Ring tournament qualifying match, Asuka, see Asuka making a return, there's no way they're going to have her lose like that. But I like how Asuka and Stephanie temporarily formed an alliance to take out Raquel and Ivy, pretty much to 2 weakest links before they squared up for a fight. That's definitely a match I certainly would like to see. So, especially now that Stephanie's on the main roster. Of course, her and Asuka, former, each won the NXT Women's title. Asuka, I would say in my estimation, when it comes to the NXT Women's Championship, I would say that she's, in many ways, the GOAT when you think about it. But yeah, of course, so that Stephanie was definitely, definitely controlling the pace until Asuka, tried to put her in submission. Match, lasted through some commercial breaks. But other than that, like all 4 women definitely had great moments. But I felt like Stephanie was definitely had more of a focus than anyone else, especially with her being a recent call up to the main roster. So they're definitely going to highlight Stephanie as much as they can. So she's definitely a very high investment. I would say even more so than Julia. So you can definitely tell it's almost like night and day when it comes to their transition on the main roster. When it comes to NXT, they're pretty much equals. But when it comes to the main roster where it matters, I think Stephanie's going to be more of a standout, than Julia in the long run. Because she has a certain charisma, a certain way to connect with the fans that even Julia herself doesn't quite have. It's not yet. So and of course, of course, Raquel was about to get the win before Rhea Ripley came, before Rhea Ripley yanked out the ring and hit her with the riptide. So, and the thing is, I feel as though Raquel is that enforcer, that muscle that nobody's really scared of like that. Like she doesn't really put fear in anybody's heart like that. So we can definitely see potentially a few between Rhea and Raquel. The way she hit her with that riptide, and then Rhea rolls it back into the ring. So Asuka hit her with the hip strike for the win. I'm seeing the winner. I've seen of course Asuka, and so so their criticism saying that they should let Asuka spot as a mystery entry, rather than announce it, right away. I could, to a certain extent, I can kind of get that, But it's just that, come on now. If anything, when I saw that Vignette last week about Asuka's return, I was excited. I was happy about it. Even though it didn't do any favors by spoiling the graphic, but in terms of you can announce her return, hey, I was all for it. But as usual, her face paint was always incredible. I definitely have to draw a picture of Asuka eventually at some point myself. But yeah, so as far as that next up, we see that Gunther is next. Since Goldberg wants to ask who's next, clearly it's Gunther. And so after a quick backstage judgment day segment that continued to build tension within the group, we saw Gunther come to the ring to celebrate regaining the World Heavyweight Championship from Jey Uso. The ring general said that Uso was the better man at WrestleMania 41. But every other night, Gunther was untouchable. And the thing is, I know Rikishi was complaining online about Jey not being treated fairly and everything like that, and how they're not getting enough opportunities, enough spotlight, enough, whatever the case is, and things like that. So, in the instance of Jey, I believe that he should have had the title longer. Instead of feeling like he's on a trial run. Like one of those 90-day, 30-day trial run things, whatever. It's like when people do subscriptions, they have trial run. So I felt like Jey had a trial run championship, and so if anything, because of his popularity, that's what really gave him the surge. So because of Beat Mania and everything like that, going through WrestleMania season, the momentum was high. It was on fire. And I know we talked about this on Monday. It's just that that Jey has a shirt for every city that he's in. Recently, recently Cena's been doing that more, but you usually don't see wrestlers reveal a shirt each week for different cities, color scheme for different cities. Shirt for different cities. Other than Stone Cold, Brock Lesnar, even to an extent, even John Cena. And so because the thing is like no matter what city, the thing about it is that pretty much no matter what city you're in, there's going to be a 316 shirt. So when WWE comes to DC, there's always a those have in for Washington, but everywhere they're like a DC 316 shirt, right? Or if you're in Philadelphia, Philly 316. Vegas 316. I couldn't find it when I was out there for maybe that's another story. Um, like let's say you're in Dallas 316, so on and so forth, right? And even when Rock had those Suplex City shirts, it was like a Suplex City, like for each city that there was, there was a shirt for that. Like let's say Suplex City for Philadelphia, Suplex City for Dallas, Suplex City for San Francisco, whatever the case is, wherever Boston, Suplex City, you know what I mean, like so on and so forth, right? So Jey Uso has been starting to do that even more, and like I say, someone, even though he's not someone who is a needle mover like Austin or Cena, so on and so forth, he's not as polished, as much of a higher caliber wrestler, as polished in the ring. He's not as polished in the ring as, let's say, Shawn Michaels, for example. You know what I mean? He might not have the same technical repertoire as a Kurt Angle or a Bret Hart, name it, right? But the thing about it is that, like I see, Jey has a certain charisma, he has a certain popularity, likability when it comes to the fans. And so I say all that to say that on one end, Jey should have had a longer title run, at least hold on until like SummerSlam. Right? Now, if you want to go back to Gunther taking the belt off him, fine, but you could have at least waited. And so, I don't want to go into this rabbit hole again, but in that aspect, Jey should have had a better title run. Should have had a longer title run and a better one too. But at the same time, when it comes to the Samoan bloodline, Anwani family, Keisha himself has even said that they have been in sports entertainment, WWE and whatnot, for like 75 years. For nearly as long as Vince has been alive. People going by that. And with that being said, they have had that long of a reign of dominance. Like they are the ultimate wrestling dynasty. And they have a lineage that's highly decorated. I would say the most decorated wrestling lineage of all time. Starting off, of course, you have Hachi Pure Maivia, you have the Wild Samoans, Yokozuna, The Rock, of course, obviously what he's done, Roman, Usos, even Nia. You know what I mean? Like you name it, like each of them have been champions, have been decorated. So it's not like, his bloodline has had the short end of the stick for a long time because they have it. You know what I mean? So it's just at the same time, it's not like they're being treated that super unfair. But yeah, like I said, I'll go back to that and say that if anything, I'd say Jay's title should last a little bit longer, but not so much to the point where he was going to have a Roman title run, because that ain't going to happen for a long time, really, especially not in the near future. But yeah, like I said, when it came to the ring general, on that night, he showed that he was superior. Just naturally, Gunther just is far and away within that square circle, is far and away superior to Jey Uso is. So this led to the intro to what's next for the champ. But it seemed like the fans knew what it was. They started chanting Goldberg. And so Goldberg came out. You could tell he was winded. He could barely walk. So it's just like, pretty much. It's probably going to be said about what Goldberg performed on Twitter. Let me see. I think it was pretty hilarious, because there definitely always a time when it comes to those memes. So pull it up right now. And so the meme was, was about the way that Goldberg, the way that Goldberg, was walking back to the locker room. And so they were saying, oh, here it is. It says Goldberg's knees are being held together by bubblegum. Here it is. They said that Goldberg's knees are being held together by bubblegum popsicle sticks and the sheer grace of God. Like that means that that Goldberg, his knees are fragile. This dude, even though he's physically, aesthetically is built, at the same time his body can't take that much anymore. And he was out of breath while doing the promo. He was winded. All of it in Gunther's face. And Gunther had this expression on his face like, if this dude doesn't get out of my face and leave me alone, like he could read it. Like if anything, I felt bad for Gunther, because and Goldberg even joked, he made a joke saying that he's due for his 3 minutes, and I'm thinking if it's a 3 minute match, as long as it goes in Gunther's favor, that's what matters the most. Excuse the background noise, but yeah, like I said, as far as that, Gunther's gonna have to carry Goldberg on his shoulders like he was the son when it comes to this match. I mean, if anything, it's just like someone of Gunther's caliber deserves so much better. And for Goldberg to demand and kick and scream for the longest time about having a retirement match, right? And he felt that it was owed to him, and somebody made a promise to him for a retirement match. Now Triple H in charge, and it's up to him to execute that. It's just like this screams entitlement. It really, really screams entitlement because you are in no way, shape, or form, a fraction of who you once were. You're in no way, shape, or form in the position to compete. To compete to even have a decent match. And so it's just like, dude, how dare you? Like, come on now. And like I say, Gunther better dog walk this guy. Then we have JD McBobblehead versus AJ Styles. The winner of this match, the phenomenal AJ Styles. And then we have no rivalry renewed, as Bayley came out to the ring with a promo about how she does what she wants. How she does what she does for the fans, not for championships and accolades. You could definitely tell this is definitely a shot at Becky. And the truth is, Bayley is highly decorated. She's a Grand Slam champion herself, but her accomplishments are not held in the same regard as, I would say, like the rest of the horsemen. That's why, some people feel like Bayley gets the short end of the stick when it comes to the horsewoman, even though she's just as important as all the other three. You know what I mean? So Bayley talked about how she does what she does for fans, not for titles or accolades, for the love of the game. She said Becky Lynch, taking her out before WrestleMania only made her stronger. So then, of course, Becky comes out with a Chicago Bears, jacket. So she's definitely being a heel. Typical heel thing, because Seth is a huge Bears fan himself. So very fitting. So of course the man Becky came out to respond. So the fans were happier to see her at Mania than they would have been with Bayley. And then of course Becky agreed to defend the women's IC title against Bayley before taking a swing at her. Obviously, Becky missed, and so that's when Bayley knocked her down out of the ring. And it was very straightforward. And so of course here we are with another horsewoman battle. This time is Becky versus Bayley, and all the horsewomen used to face each other. The only ones that haven't had programmed yet, at least until now, with Bayley and Becky. So they've always gone up against each other, whether it was whether it was Charlotte versus Becky, Charlotte versus Sasha, Sasha versus Bayley, Sasha versus Becky, so on and so forth. Like I said, Charlotte versus Becky, Charlotte versus Sasha, Sasha versus Bayley, Sasha versus Becky. but never Bailey versus Becky. So until now, you know what I mean. So to make up for them not having a match together at Mania, and so we have, let's see, of course, we're obviously racing with that. And now we have Liv Morgan versus Kyrie Sane. Um, and so of course, this was, of course, Kyrie Sane taking on Liv Morgan singles action. And so after Kyrie Sane took Liv down, the women's two-time women's world champion event immediately grabbed his shoulder and rolled out the ring. And from what it's looking like, looks like a legit injury. Hopefully, it's nothing heinous, but there's talks of her possibly missing the evolution. Like I said, missing the evolution, PLE, and potentially SummerSlam, which is going to be in her hometown, New Jersey. And it would definitely suck if Liv is out for those. So we're Sane was just walking around waiting for the referee to check on him until the show went to a break. Return to find out that the match was called off due to Liv being injured. And so because of that, Kyrie Sane went by forfeit. And unfortunately, this just throws any plans with Liv just out the window, because we're looking to see, there's potential for Liv Morgan versus Nikki Bella. So that storyline is up in jeopardy. And for Liv to be, of course, for her to be involved in the women's evolution match, SummerSlam, and just, especially Liv being seen as more of a primetime player. That this unfortunate freak accident injury. Hopefully, there's not anything heinous. But next up, we have Jey Uso versus Rusev versus Sheamus versus Bronson Reed, which is the main event. And the winner of this match is Jey Uso. And of course, we have Braun Breaker showing up to prevent Jay from hitting the frog splash on Bronson Reed with Sami Zayn and pinned the show to fight him. So of course, LA Knight pushed Bronson Reed off the top rope and allowed Jey Uso to him with the two big splashes for the win. Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes come out and show up at the end of the show, and of course, Seth and his faction, it has no name yet. They're standing out, and Cody Rhodes turns to Jay and gives him a handshake. And so, of course, they're eventually going to be facing off against each other as the former, tag team champions and best buddies and stuff like that. So, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that unfolds. So I would say that this was better than SmackDown. Of course, Asuka's return. We have, we have Becky versus Bailey. That's official. Jay advances. And I would say that the things that were, takeaways and disappointments were Goldberg's return and Liv Morgan's injury. And the fact that Goldberg even has merchandise, I said, nah, this dude better not get that belt back. This is horrible. But other than that, I digress. So finally, when it comes to wrap this up. Finally, when it comes to NXT recap, we see that Blake Monroe officially signed her NXT contract, no longer Mariah May, and we have Jordan Grace versus Lola Vice, Thea Hale versus Jada Parker, Kalani Jordan versus Lash Legend, Zarya versus Izzy Dane, and Trick Williams, AJ Francis, and Casey Navarro versus Elijah, Josh Briggs, and Yoshiki Inamura. First off, we see Jada Parker versus Thea Hale. And the winner of this match is none other than Jada Parker, even though there's a little bit of controversy because, Thea thought that Jada had tapped out, but the ref didn't see it. So of course, this allowed for Jada to hit her finisher, after the hold was released to get the win. But yeah, of course, but we definitely need to see the finish be reviewed. I think I'm going to do that for next week. Next, we have Kalani Jordan versus Lash Legend, and they have come a very long way. You know what I mean? And so, Trick and Mello don't miss in the ring, and when it comes to the ladies, because you know what I mean. So, like I said, Mello likes to say that he don't miss when it comes to the ring, and also, who this girl is, and Trick don't miss either in the women's department, obviously. So it's pretty much an extension of. I feel like this was an extension of Mello versus Trick. You know what I mean? In more ways than one. So we saw Kalani Jordan take on Lash Legend in an Evolution Eliminator, and despite being a smaller competitor, Kalani Jordan made sure to make a presence known by taking control right out the gate. So we even saw Kalani counters suplex to a cradle for a 2 count, very competitive, and of course Lash Legend, being the powerhouse that she is, so power moves. While Kalani Jordan used her agility and speed to keep her off balance. And so, of course, finally, after countering some finisher attempts, Lash Legend hits her own to get the win. And so it's definitely a feud that WWE should keep in his back pocket, because these two definitely have great chemistry. Much like I said, Mello versus Trick could be the women's version of that feud when you think about it. So as far as that, and will Lash and Kalani be on this list? Well, time will tell once I get to that segment. And we have Trick Williams, as I said, along with Wes Lee this time, because Navarro wasn't clear to compete, so Wes Lee takes his place. And enemies become partners, right? They put their differences to the side, and Wes, like I said, they made amends for it, and Trick pretty much apologized for the slap, whatever, and so they put their differences, to the side. Of course, like I said, that's when they take on Elijah, Josh Briggs, and Amara. And so the winners of this match were Elijah and Amara and Briggs. Then we have Zarya versus Izzy Dane. The winner of this match, surprisingly, Izzy Dane. We have Lola Vice versus Jordan Grace. Jordan Grace defeats Lola Vice. And so, of course, like I said, Blake Monroe is officially an NXT superstar. And of course, this is some of the whole fatal influence thing kicks up, and so like I said, this fight breaks out with her and JC Jane, and but at the same time, I feel as though I feel as though that like this, like I see Blake's reception felt pretty flat. It wasn't until eventually she started to kind of pick things up, but especially when fatal influence came into the picture. But yeah, as far as that, like I said, there's definitely more to come. And also like the stare down between Trick Williams and Oba Femi. So I definitely want to see them, run that back once again at some point. But yeah. And so of course now it's time to check out this BRP 50. At least what has been revealed thus far. They're counting down. Let me see. Matter of fact, let's see what we got so far. I know number 50 is R-Truth. Let's going through this timeline right now. Excuse me for that. You know what? I'm going to go in further. All right. So now, anyway. So now it's time to go into the BRP 50 as it has been verified. And number 50 is R-Truth. And number 49 so far is Pretty Boy Smooth. At 48 is Il O'Neal. Number 47, Jay Bougie. He's gone past 50, moved up to 47. Number 46, Jordan Blade. Number 45, Janai Kai. 44, Lee Moriarty, aka Evil Frank Ocean, as I call him. Number 43, Calvin Tankman. Number 42, Rio. 41, Trent Miguel. 40 through 36. Number 40 is A.R. Fox. 39, Brian Keith. 38, Montez Ford. 37, Angelo Dawkins. I was surprised that see Dawkins had a 4. That wasn't on my bingo card or whatever. Number 36, Maya World. Number 35. So, of course, 35 there. O'Shea Edwards, Big Bad Kaiju, of course. Number 34 is Powerhouse Hobbs. Number 33, Kofi Kingston. 32, Xavier Woods. 31, Queen Aminata. 30, Stephen Wolf. 29, congratulations to Last Legend for finally making the BRP 50. Congratulations to you. Like I said, myself and of course myself, and myself and Gabby from Lip Gloss and Ladders have campaigned for her to make the list. And so of course 29 Last Legend, 28 is Wesley, 27 is of course Man Like Darius, 26 Ricky Saints, 25 Khan, 24 Leon Slater, 23 Isaiah Bronner, 22 Javon Evans, number 21 Kalani Jordan. So they all NXT next list. So number 20 through 11. 20 Shelton Benjamin, 19 Bobby Lashley, 18 Jamie Parker, 17 Carmelo Hayes, 16 Saul Ruka, 15 Will Nightingale, 14 Jay Cargill, 13 Kevin Knight, 12 Michael Oku, and 11 Myra Reed. So far, we haven't gotten to the top 10 yet. But when that happens, definitely going to give a review about that. But but so far, I see a very, very solid list. Very, very decent list, and very much respected. And so now that is pretty much it. And so now it is time for me to, of course, give the birthday shout outs. Of course, June 17th, Kendrick Lamar, 22-time Grammy winner, hip hop legend Kendrick Lamar turns 38. On that same day, Saturday Night Live former alumni Joe Piscopo turns 74. And, June 19th, Zoe Saldana turns 47. Dirk Nowitzki turns 47 as well on the same day. June 20th, Kira Sheard turns 38. June 21st, of course, Chris Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy as well turns 46. On June 22nd, Clyde Drexler turns 63. Pete Maravich would turn 78. Of course, Bruce Campbell turns 67. Meryl Streep turns 76. And that's it when it comes to the birthdays. And before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom, and of course that word of wisdom is that of course to remember that the Lord is your light, and salvation. Whom shall you fear, and whom shall you be afraid? And also to be mindful of the company that you keep, because evil communication corrupts corrupts good character and company. So of course, like I said, just be mindful of your circle, and also just to exercise boundaries. So that is my word of wisdom for the day. And also remember that you are victorious, because greater is He that's in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in the last place. Please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can also watch my with YouTube as well. YouTube.com/FRS Virginia. Please make sure to like and subscribe to continue to stay up to date to the episodes and content that I put out there. So, of course, thank you very much for listening and watching. And may this day be the very best day of your life.